بسم الله والحمد لله وصلى الله على رسول الله. Abu Aqiq, mashallah, here on campus, and it's quiet. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning, a little bit after 9, I guess. Quiet morning. Yeah, this is mashallah, a lot of memories here that I had in my youth, mashallah. Yeah, so mashallah. The time. It passes, it waits for no one, as they say. So I'm approaching Memorial Hill and really take in the view here. Yeah, mashallah, as I was saying in the other video, that certainly the natural beauty of the campus and the town and the area, it really facilitated a lot of personal growth. So yeah, I mean, I used to go back off in the woods here, and there's a railroad track, and I'd walk that and try to get myself together. Even my first semester, I had قد يقال existential crisis, and from that point on, I was just trying to get it together, so to speak. Meaning, in terms of searching for, at that time, trying to find the meaning, purpose of life, and what I want to do with my life, and what is the purpose of life, and does it have any purpose? I didn't come, I'm alhamdulillah, it's different. If you ask a Muslim what the purpose of life is, it's clear. It's to obey the Creator. But at that time, I was very mixed up and confused. I didn't call myself a Muslim. I wasn't raised as a Muslim. So alhamdulillah, because of having that time alone, a lot of solo time, a lot of time for reflection, alhamdulillah, I was, by the guidance of Allah Ta'ala, I was able to, I encountered, Allah put certain people in my life. I met some brothers who were students of traditional knowledge, and it was then I could start to piece it together. Just kind of a background check. I came here, I didn't have any religion or anything. I didn't even think about religion very much when I came here. And then I got into meditation and started realizing there's something more to human existence in this material world, and that just kind of led to one thing to another. And with Islam also, I had read Malcolm X, which kind of, I came to Islam like through two different routes. Part one was through the, like, if you wish to use the word, spiritual perspective. I was trying to find out the truth about God, trying to find the truth about, like, the mashallah, things that, as a Muslim, we know these things through it's prophetic knowledge that we learned it from. But again, I'm using at that time that trying to find the truth about what happens to us after we die. Mashallah, the soul, does a human being have a soul? These were questions that I had, and so that was one angle that I came to Islam, was through what one may say a spiritual angle. And then after my first year here, that summer, mashallah, many summers ago now, I read Malcolm X. There was a woman I knew, and she gave me a copy of Malcolm X's autobiography when I say Malcolm X. And that kind of, I was already waking up in the, like, as you say, like the black nationalist type thing. And I had taken a course that spring semester about Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon was from the Caribbean, I don't remember which island, and he fought in the Algerian Revolution against the French colonization, colonial forces. And that, there were other things I was reading at that time that woke me up racially and like in terms of having I already had a political sort of consciousness, social consciousness, but on a more of a racial level. And then Malcolm X just set it off, because it put everything, like in terms of just my experiences growing up, a lot of the things that he spoke about, I even though I wasn't living at his era, I could really relate to, and just things as an African American, just things that you see growing up in the culture, and things you see in yourself that you have to struggle with. And Malcolm X really woke me up. And then of course there was the quasi-Islamic element in the autobiography. And then at the end of his life, Malcolm leaves the nation, and he becomes a self-professed Sunni Muslim. So that was that even though initially I went more down the line of the black nationalist angle. I didn't really think, again, I wasn't really thinking about a formal religion, and I went more down the angle of the black nationalism thing, and that led me through the whole thing at that time, the whole Afrocentric movement, and I mean, I was just devouring books. I mean, mashallah, and I say books nowadays, these guys, what took me a couple of years to do, you could do in 3 weeks with YouTube and online. And so back then it was books. So I was devouring a lot of the basically the black nationalist literature. Not your standard, like here at Amherst it was more like dare I say like Negro literature. But what I was reading was mostly like the black nationalist type stuff, Anta Diop, Chancellor Williams, George James, of course. I can't even remember all these guys. But I mean, I would go, I had some family in Dallas at the time, and go to the black bookstore and just stack up on whatever I could get my hands on, conspiracy theory type books. So that's where I was at that time. But all of that, it still led to the two ultimate questions. Who is God, and what happens to us after we die? And I could see with the black nationalists, they weren't even close to any sort of consensus on this issue. And the ones that claimed, like, in terms of like a belief in God, sometimes it was incoherent altogether, and then other times it was just outright absurd. Because even like for the nation, which they had a lot of my sympathies, that the nation, I mean, their belief, they believed that God took, this is blasphemy. Islamically, we don't believe that the Creator is similar to the creations in any way whatsoever. But they claim that God was born to a white woman in 1877. Even though I really, really wanted to believe in the ideology of, when I say the nation, I mean the so-called nation of Islam. Even when I really, really, really wanted to believe in the ideology of the nation, that thing I couldn't handle that. I couldn't accept that. And that always caused me to have doubt about the whole organization. Plus, besides, like, there was a lot of dubious stuff that was going on with them. And also, in addition to that, there was their involvement with Malcolm X being, in some capacity, being involved with, or let's say the nation being involved with, in some capacity, the killing of Malcolm X. I'm not saying they pulled the trigger per se, or, you know, there was other stuff. It kind of seems to be clearly a pretty thorough conspiracy regarding his assassination. But it led to one thing to another. But those two questions, who is God and what happens to us after we die, and I guess a third, not so much of a question, but yeah, I guess you could pose it as such, was the legacy of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And because some people, like some of the black nationalists, like Chancellor Williams, for example, they have this very oversimplified view of Islam. And so they basically were out, people from his camp in the black nationalist community were out to trash Islam, him, and I heard this guy change, the Ben Yochanan guy. But anyway, at that time, that was the situation. So that was one camp, and other people just ignored the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And others, you know, again, kind of would fall into this sort of anti-Muslim or anti-Arab rhetoric. But the ultimate questions weren't being answered. Again, what happens to us? Is there a God? And if so, who is God? What befits God? What doesn't befit God? And what happens to us after we die? And they couldn't answer those two questions. I mean, some of the more let's say ancient Kemet community, these guys were all around. This is going back decades now. So I see now what they call the conscious community. These guys were around back when I was in college, and not in the same iteration, but the same kind of rhetoric. And it wasn't new when I discovered them. So they have like the ancient Kemet people, but at the end of the day, it wasn't, even back then I was really trying to research this. It wasn't clear to me what they believed about God. And then when it came to the issues of the afterlife, again, there wasn't, I mean, they have what they call the Book of the Dead, but it wasn't really clear. So anyway, with that said, the basic message kept coming up in my mind, which is very clear from the basic message of Islam, which was, in essence, worship the Creator, not the creations. And that there was this man, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was a prophet of God. And this is another issue I don't want to talk about now, but coming from the Western tradition, what is a prophet is something that definitely needs to be clarified for people. But what I knew from just reading history, that this was a phenomenally special person. And again, he's calling people to worship the Creator and not the creations. And he's talking about the events of the hereafter, that there is an afterlife, and these are the events that occur after death. I felt compelled to know more. And then of course, with the issue with the life of Malcolm, he left the nation and he became a self-professed Sunni Muslim. So this issue of Islam was still there. And one thing led to another. I encountered a mentor here in town, and he kind of directed me, but he didn't have traditional knowledge. And that's the other thing. It's one to get to the point where the person is learning about, is calling himself a Muslim, but the other issue is a person needs to have traditional knowledge, because without that, the person's going to just be lost in trying to figure stuff out and piece things together. And it's certainly not an efficient way to learn. Okay, I'm going to cut it off here. I'm going to make a request to someone going by, inshallah. Okay, this is Baraka Quest. Check us out at barakaquest.wordpress.com.